This tutorial is going to go over how to use Tinkercad to create three-dimensional designs that you can then 3D print. To begin with, you want to come up and go to www.tinkercad.com. Like I said, Tinkercad is a design software, a CAD software, that allows you to create three-dimensional designs. It's online, so you will need a web connection, and you will need to sign in. For Albemarle County students and teachers, you don't have to create a Tinkercad account. You can use your ACPS Google account to log in and to create designs. It is recommended, if you have elementary students using Tinkercad, that you still send a permission form home even though they're not creating an account. To log in or to create an account, it's the same series of steps. You want to come over to sign in. In the sign in window, ignore email or username and next, but come down and click on sign in using social providers. This is the same if you've already created an account or if you need to create an account. Then you want to choose sign in with Google. In the new window, select your ACPS Google account. You might be prompted for additional permissions through your Google account. Click Allow, and eventually you will have created a free Tinkercad account. I've already created my account, so you didn't see any of the windows or login screens that you would normally see if you are creating an account for the first time. This is the home base for your Tinkercad account. You have a lot of headings up here, but I generally don't touch those. The area that I do look at is my recent designs. You might not have anything in this, but to go ahead and create a new design, you want to click on Create New Design. I'd steer clear of Create Legacy Design. That is the old Workplace tools and area, and it's the old tools. The newest tools are here in Create New Design. I'm going to click on that. It opens my work area. You have a couple of different places that you want to know about and look at and see. The first is your Workplane area. This is where all the 3D designs will be placed and created. Over here on the right, you have a bunch of shapes that you can choose. And all you have to do is drag them over, which I'll show in a second. Above that, you have a drop-down list where you can choose additional shapes, like connectors if you're building something that needs to be a robot and you're 3D printing different parts. If I click on it, you'll see different connectors that you could use, or I could choose text and choose different letters. For now, I'm going to go back to basic shapes. Up here at the top, you have a whole bunch of different tools. Right now they're grayed out because I don't have anything in my Workplane area. Once I do, and once I select an object in my Workplane area, you'll see these grayed out buttons change from a light gray to a black. Finally, up at the very top, you have the name of your current file. Tinkercad gives it a very funny name, Fantastic Lulia Lappy. Before I do anything, and before I have students do anything, I have them change their name. I use a specific naming convention with students, and that is a naming convention that describes the name of the object in a couple of words, the student's first name, and then a version number. To rename this file, I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to delete that text, and I'm going to use my naming convention. So I'm going to name this sample work, because that's really what it is, my first name, and then I'm going to put a V1 for version 1. I do this because sometimes I may want to duplicate a project if I want to make changes, but I want to keep my original one. When I click away, it will save it as that name. In the Workplane area, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can edit your grid, and the grid refers to this grid right here. You might want to edit the grid if you want to change from metric to standard units. Right now this is in millimeters, and the snap grid is set at 1 millimeter. So each one of these little tiny boxes is 1 millimeter. If you want to use a different measurement system, click on Edit Grid, and then choose from the drop-down list next to units. You could choose inches, and it gives your workspace dimensions, or your workplane dimensions, as roughly 8 inches by 8 inches. And click Update Grid. You can now see each one of my little boxes is now 1/8 of an inch. So in total, from here to here is 1 inch. That's important to know because if you create a cube, and I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on it, and I'm just going to drag it over, and it creates a cube. So it's important to know the dimensions of your cube or whatever you create, because to 3D print a 1 inch by 1 inch cube, you can guesstimate that it will take approximately 30 to 45 minutes to 3D print. That's why it's important to know the dimensions. So this right here, if I was to 3D print it, would take roughly 30 to 45 minutes. Now, to change the dimensions of this, I can do a couple of different things. You'll see if I hover over a box, I have the dimensions of the width and the height, and this refers to that. If I want to resize this, I can just click and drag and hold it, and you can see now it's 1/2 inch. Maybe I want to make this a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch cube. And you can see now my cube is much smaller. When I select the object, you'll see that right now it's solid. I can make it a hole, which I'll show you later, but for the most part, you'll probably be using solid shapes. That means that they will actually 3D print. The color right now is defaulted to red. The color, when you 3D print something, doesn't really matter because you'll be printing the 3D object in the color of the filament. The color might matter if you're trying to create a digital design right here. Let me drag this over here. It might matter if you're creating a digital design, and to change the color of a cube, you would come over and click on the red solid button, and I could change it to, let's say, purple. And you can see it now changed. A couple of other things that you might want to know how to do is when you click on a shape, if you wanted to raise it above the work plane, you can grab this little cone and raise it up in the air. That 1 1/8 inch tells me the distance from the work plane to the bottom of that cube. I can also rotate by grabbing one of the spindles. So if I want to rotate it like that, I can do that. I can also rotate it vertically in the air. I'm going to rotate it back to the way that I had it. That's how you manipulate and change an object, rotating it, moving it around. But you'll notice you see this little shadow right here, and that means it's above the work plane. How you can actually tell how far it is above the work plane is by using the tools over in the left-hand side. I can click these buttons, and this is a representation of the work plane area, to look at it from different angles. So if I want to look at it from above, I could click there. From the right-hand side, and you can see how far it is above my work plane. I could look at it from the bottom, from the left-hand or the front side, from the left-hand side, and so forth. If I want to go back to my original view, I can click the Home View button, and you'll see it snaps back to the way that I had it. To zoom in and zoom out, you can click these buttons. I don't usually change this, and I might use this if I have a whole bunch of stuff and I want to see it all in the work plane area. But right now I just have one cube, so I'll probably go back to the home view. A couple of other ways that you can work around your work plane area is if you hold down the control button on a Mac, or if you just right click and hold and then drag, you can see I can kind of rotate around freely and kind of look and see how things are. I'm going to move my cube back to the work plane. Having space between the work plane and an object and having nothing under it can be problematic when you're 3D printing. The reason why is because when you 3D print something, it does look at the work plane surface and its relationship to whatever objects you have. So right now, when the 3D printer would go to print this, it would try to fill in the empty space between the bottom of this cube and the work plane. It's a pretty good idea for new users to make sure that everything is on the work plane surface. And you can see I just grabbed the cone and moved it up and down. If you move it below the work plane surface, like I did right here, and then you go to 3D print, only the top part that's above the work plane surface will print. So all of this stuff down here will not be 3D printed. So I'm going to move it back up. I'm also going to change this now and make it kind of a flat rectangle. So I'm kind of moving side to side. I'll move it down like that so that I have a flat piece. If I click and hold and drag, I can move it to the center again. If you want to, let's say, put text on top of a shape, you can do it by coming over and clicking on this, or you could come up to text, either one. If you just want single letters, you can drag these out. Ed. But if you want to do a whole bunch of text at once, you can drag out the text button. Then once you have the text button out, you can retype whatever you want the text to say. So I might want it to say Willie. I might want to change the font to Sans Mono. I can change the height. So I may bring it up or down. I may do it right here. I can also use this to raise it up or down. I can add a bevel to it, which I'm not going to do. So now I have some text here. I'm going to make this text about the size of my purple rectangle. So I'm going to click and hold and drag it to make it a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to move it on top of my purple square. This might be something that you would want to do if you were making, let's say, a keychain. When you have something overlapping another shape, like I have these letters overlapping this rectangle, everything that you can't see is actually fused into the two objects. So if I was to 3D print this, it would print the base, and then it would start printing the letters. Over here with Ed, it would print two different letters that would not be joined. That's why it's a good idea to have a base when you're doing letters. Right now, these two different objects are just that, two different objects. And I can adjust them accordingly. If I wanted to, let's say, delete an object, I can click on it, and then up here, click on Delete. I can also duplicate something that I've done. If I click on it, and then come up here and choose the Duplicate button. Even though it looks like I don't have two Ds, if I move it away, you can see I now have two Ds. Another thing that people might want to do is group shapes, and that means in this work area, even though these two things are fused, if you group them, then you can drag them around and adjust them as one piece. To do that, I'm going to click and hold and drag to select all of the shapes that I want to group, and then I would come up and choose the Group tool. Now you can see it's one piece, and I can move it around and also scale it as one piece. When you are ready to 3D print something, what you need to do is check for a couple of things. I'm going to go ahead and delete these two objects. And let's say I wanted to print this object right here. I'd first check to make sure that there's no space from the workplane. And I can check that by moving around and looking to make sure that there's no gaps between my object and the workplane area. That means the 3D printer will not try to fill in any gaps and waste filament. The other thing that you want to check is to make sure that there are not objects that are just barely touching each other. For instance, if I was to come over here and create a basic shape, and I'll create a box, and then I will create a sphere. I'm going to raise the sphere up and move it close to my box. Right now, there is very little connection between my cube and my sphere. Chances are, if I was to 3D print this, this sphere might break off. And so having objects fused a little bit more than normal is a good idea. So this is a much better thing to 3D print because there's more connection between these two objects. If you want to add a hole, you could also add a hole by bringing an object out. And let's say I want to put a cylinder through this. I'm going to resize this. And I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to move it inside of this cube right here. With my cylinder selected, I can come over and click on hole. And now you can see that I have a hole in part of my cube. If I want to make it bigger and make it go all the way through, which right now it's not, I can just drag this out so that it goes all the way through. This gray part will not print. It's only there as a guideline to kind of show you. If it bothers you, resize it so it's exactly 1 inch for this cube. It doesn't really bother me that much. I could then group these 3 things, and you would see that it disappeared. The other things that you need to do to make sure that your things are ready for 3D printing is to make sure that everything is in this Workplane area. If you have something way out here and you don't know it, that can cause issues with 3D printing. So this might be a good time to choose Fit All Items in View so that you see if there is anything way out here. So if I put something way out there, you can see it's way off the surface area, and I might want to, or I should, get rid of that. Once you have everything ready for you to 3D print, what you want to do is come up to Export. What to include everything in the design is what you probably will choose. You could also select only certain shapes to print. The file type that you need to download to load into a 3D printer like the Affinia or the UP or the MakerBot is a .stl. When you click on this, it will prompt you to save this file. Save it somewhere where you can find it. Once you download the STL, that file for the most part can't be edited. It's a file that you would then bring into the 3D printer. So you want to make sure before you download and save an STL file that you have everything that you want exactly the way that you want it. So I'm going to click Save and save this to my desktop. That's how you would download this file. A couple of other things to know about Tinkercad. Right now we're working in this area, and let's say you had another Tinkercad file that you wanted to work on. The easiest way to exit out of this is to click on the Tinkercad button. This will take you back to the original area, and if you want to go back and edit from your home screen, you can click on, after you hover over the design, Tinker This. That will reopen the design that you were working on. And you can see it's all still there. If you want to duplicate, I'm going to go back to the home screen by clicking on the Tinkercad button. If you want to duplicate the entire design, let's say you want to make a version 2 and delete this, you can click on, after hovering over the design, the gear icon and click Actions. Then you would want to choose Duplicate. Right now it's making a copy of this. And when it's ready, I'm going to click on Tinker This. And it's opening a copy. It gives you a new name right up here, so I would probably rename this to Sample Work Willy version 2. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I really don't want to 3D print that. And now if I just wanted to print my name, I would come up and choose Export, everything in the design, and then choose .stl. You'll notice now it's automatically renamed to V2 so I don't get it confused with my other one. And I would click Save. That's the basics of Tinkercad. If you have any other questions, send me an email. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.